They say wills bring closure. For me, it felt more like a punchline. I was sitting across from Mr. Caldwell, my late father's longtime attorney, in a room so polished and mahogany rich, it felt like a museum exhibit for egos. Brandon, my older brother, had dressed for the drama, of course. Pinstripe suit, Rolex flashing like a warning signal. And that smirk? Fully loaded. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat with the gravity of someone about to read the 10 Commandments. Everything goes to your brother, Mr. Bennett. Not shocking, but still it hit. Like a second rejection, posthumous this time. The house in the hills, Brandon's. The lakefront estate, his. Dad's company, Bennett Strategies. All subsidiaries, stock options and the board seat. Signed, sealed, handed over to the golden boy. I didn't say a word, just nodded and waited for the final nail. There was one. There's a small personal account left for Nathaniel. Photographs, a few heirlooms. From your grandmother, mostly. Brandon gave me a condescending shrug. Hey, at least you got the family albums. Maybe there's a photo of you in there somewhere. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I knew something he didn't. We wrapped up. Brandon offered to get me a job at his company. Something research adjacent. I declined. When I got home, I opened the drawer I hadn't touched in 2 years. Inside was a manila envelope from my mum, the one she gave me months before she died, with one instruction: don't open this until after your father's gone. I kept that promise. And now it was time. I tore the seal. At the top was a letter, handwritten. Mum's clean, deliberate script stared back at me. My dearest Nate, if you're reading this, your father is gone, and I know exactly what he's done. She had built something, quietly, strategically, over 2 decades. Investments, portfolios, clean energy startups, climate innovation, tech solutions that aligned with everything I'd built my career around, the very things Dad had called idealistic trash. But Mum believed in it, in me, and everything she had built. It was all in my name. The more I read, the more I realised my mum hadn't just believed in me. She'd bet on me. Every document was precise. Stock certificates, offshore accounts, funding agreements. There were notes in the margins, strategy timelines, even risk mitigation plans. She hadn't just invested, she had built a fortress. Wind farms in the Midwest. A tech startup using algae to absorb ocean carbon. Education initiatives about sustainability. It wasn't random, it was laser-focused, the exact kind of work I'd dedicated my life to. And she did it all behind my father's back. For 2 decades, while Dad and Brandon played corporate kingmakers, Mum was laying the groundwork for a future they wouldn't even recognise, one where their entire playbook was obsolete. She didn't just pass down wealth, she passed down a mission, and she made sure I was the only one who could carry it. Brandon can't touch any of it, she wrote. It's airtight. I made sure. I spent that night in my home office. No marble floors or leather walls, just a wooden desk I built myself and a fossil replica on the shelf. The house may have been modest, but it was mine, mortgage-free, by the way. Unlike Brandon's penthouse condo that Dad helped finance, my phone buzzed. A text from Brandon. We should talk tomorrow. About your future. There may still be room for you at Bennett Strategies. The first stared at it for a while, then replied, Sure, come by at 10. I have something to show you. The next morning, right on schedule, his silver BMW parked out front. Brandon strutted up my walkway like he owned the place. He didn't even compliment the garden, native plants, pollinator-friendly, the kind of thing he'd call hippie landscaping. He walked in and went straight into pitch mode. We could really use someone like you, Nate. Data analysis, environmental optics. We package you right, the board will eat it up. I gestured to the table. There's something Mom wanted you to see first. He glanced at the documents, slowly at first, then faster. The colour drained from his face as he flipped through the pages, realization creeping into every line of his expression. This can't be real. She didn't even know finance. I almost laughed. She knew more than you and Dad combined. She just didn't need to be loud about it. He sat down, stunned. His posture crumbled like a house of cards. But Dad's company, it's mine. Yeah, I said, just like he wanted. But what Mom built, that's mine. And it's worth 10 times more, both in dollars and in impact. Brandon stared at me, calculating, recalibrating. We could merge, he said finally. Imagine what we could do with both legacies. I shook my head. That's not what she wanted. And it's not what I want either. He stood up, anger flashing behind his polished exterior. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said. But at least it's mine to make. As he stormed out, I felt something shift inside me. Lighter, steadier, like I had finally stepped into the space Mum had quietly carved out for me. And I wasn't done yet. The morning after Brandon stormed out of my house, my phone looked like it had declared war. 17 missed calls, dozens of texts, from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, from distant aunts, from board members I'd only met once in a suit and tie family photo. Nate, what's this I'm hearing about your mum's holdings? Hey cuz, let's chat investments. Your father would be devastated, Uncle Charles. It was like tossing a brick into still water and watching the ripples turn into waves. I ignored every single one. Instead, I drove straight to Hale and Associates, the small but sharp legal firm that had been quietly managing Mom's assets since the early 2000s. Marcus Hale greeted me with the kind of calm that made you trust him immediately. Young, no nonsense, glasses always halfway down his nose like he was too busy thinking 3 moves ahead to bother adjusting them. Your mother was. Brilliant, he said, sliding a thick binder across the table. She anticipated Brandon's reaction. She built protections. We sat down and started going over it all. Legal shielding, transfer protocols, documentation trails, audio recordings with advisors, even a few handwritten notes she'd logged with timestamps. It wasn't just a portfolio, it was a case file. She knew your father and brother would try to contest this, Marcus said, so she made it impossible. My favourite detail, a clause buried in one of the trusts that explicitly blocked any of Bennett Strategy's leadership from accessing the green tech patents she'd helped fund, unless the company aligned with a sustainability index she'd helped define. Mum had predicted Brandon would try to co-opt her legacy, and she cut off that path before he even knew it existed. What do you want to do next? Marcus asked me. Use it, I said. Push it forward. Fund real change. And that's how I found myself later that week at Pacific Innovation Labs. A clean energy incubator run by Dr. Alicia Torres, one of the world's leading minds in sustainable fuel alternatives. Her name had popped up in Mum's notes more than once, always underlined. I introduced myself, half expecting skepticism. But the second I mentioned my mother's name, Alicia's face softened. She was our silent donor, she said. We always wondered who believed in us when no one else would. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the facility, prototypes for solar desalination, hydrogen cell shipping tech, algae bioreactors. It felt like coming home. By the time I left, I had pledged a 7-figure investment to scale their ocean-based carbon capture program, one that my own research had fed into years ago but had never secured proper funding. Meanwhile, back at Bennett Strategies, Brandon was unravelling. The press had gotten wind of the inheritance twist. Investors were panicking. Word had spread fast that my mother's legacy was worth far more than the firm's current assets, and more importantly, aligned with the future. "The optics are killing us," Brandon texted. "We need to unify the family front. This is hurting all of us." I didn't reply. Instead, I released a press statement through Marcus's team, subtle, clean, factual. It acknowledged my mother's years of quiet environmental investments and announced the formation of a new non-profit initiative, the Eleanor Bennett Climate Fund. No drama, no attack, just truth. And truth, when properly timed, is often the most destructive force you can unleash. Brandon's response came quickly. He showed up at my house again, this time without the smugness. No suit, no watch. Just an expensive hoodie that looked oddly deflated. "The board's talking about emergency leadership restructuring," he said, pacing my living room. "We've lost 3 major investors. 2 more are on the fence." I watched him for a moment, arms crossed. "You built the company on short-term vision. That's not what the world wants anymore. And you think funding algae farms makes you the hero?" "No," I said. "But it makes me right." He stopped pacing, looked at me differently. The same way a lion might stare at the one sheep in the field that suddenly starts sprinting toward them. "We could still work together," he said. "Adapt, merge, share both visions." "You don't want to adapt," I replied. "You want to survive." Big difference. He didn't argue. He knew I was right. After he left, I poured myself a whiskey, not out of celebration, but out of grounding. I knew what came next. Boardroom chaos, press spin, legal murmurs. And I was ready for it all. Because I had something Brandon never did. Conviction. That night, I drafted an internal memo to the Bennett Strategies board. No threats, no demands. Just projections, climate finance trends, ESG-driven valuation data. The market was shifting, with or without them. You want to stay relevant? You're going to have to let go of Brandon's leadership. The next morning, news broke that Bennett Strategies had dipped to a 5-year stock low. Brandon's face was front page, looking more confused than angry. Investors were quoted anonymously. They missed the shift. Too much legacy, not enough vision. They underestimated the quiet side of the family. I sat on my porch, the wind crisp with salt from the coast, sipping coffee from a mug Mom once gave me. On the bottom it said, "The long game always wins." And I believed her. By the end of the week, I had more eyes on me than ever in my life, and not in a good way. The Wall Street Journal ran a headline that morning, "Bennett Strategies faces investor, exodus amid sustainability scandal." Inside, it read like a corporate autopsy: missed environmental benchmarks, fossil-fueled portfolios, greenwashing accusations, a decade of ignoring the signs, and now they were getting buried by them. I knew Brandon was barely hanging on. I didn't have to guess. I got the proof firsthand. He burst into my house uninvited. Again. This time, though, he didn't look angry. He looked cornered, like a man trying to keep the lights on in a room slowly flooding with seawater. "What the hell did you do?" he asked, slamming a stack of emails onto my desk. "Half our major investors are threatening to pull out." I didn't flinch. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just made sure the right people saw what was already true." The stack of papers in front of me. Third-party environmental impact reports, audits, expert commentary. I didn't even write them. I just sent them to inboxes that mattered. "You torpedoed your own company," I added. "I just stopped you from covering the damage with a glossy report and a corporate pledge you don't intend to keep." He sank into a chair, fingers drumming the armrest. "The board's talking about emergency measures," he said, "possibly selling off some divisions." I nodded. "Smart. Start with the ones still pretending coal has a future. You're enjoying this, Brandon muttered. I paused, considering. No, I'm not. Because if Dad had listened, none of this would have been necessary. That hit harder than I expected. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. For a second, the room was still. I talked to Dad's old PR guy this morning, he said, quieter now. He said the narrative's shifting, that you're being seen as the real Bennett heir, that the company lost its future when it ignored you and Mum. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have something to say, but because the silence said enough. Brandon stood abruptly, pacing. We could still fix this, he insisted. Merge the company with Mum's assets. Present a unified front. Rebuild from the inside. I leaned back in my chair. You mean use my funding to bail out your collapse? No, he said. I mean adapt together. I studied him. For once, I saw uncertainty instead of arrogance, but I also saw desperation. He didn't believe in Mum's vision. He just feared irrelevance. You spent a decade mocking the exact work we're now being praised for, I said. You called my career a non-profit science hobby. And now you want in because it's profitable. I didn't know better. You didn't want to. That landed. He looked down. Quiet. Still. Then the truth cracked through. I don't know how to lead without Dad, he said. Everything I know came from him. That, I believed. But it wasn't my job to fix that anymore. Later that night, I met with Dr. Alicia Torres and her team again. Her lab was buzzing. They'd just hit a breakthrough on their hydrogen algae fuel model. Faster absorption, higher yield, viable commercial scaling within 18 months. Mum had funded this, quietly, steadily. While Dad was sinking money into carbon-intense ad campaigns, Mum was planting seeds that were just now coming to bloom. Your mother saw what others didn't, Alicia told me. She was always 10 steps ahead. I thought about how different things might have been if Dad had listened to her even once. If he hadn't reduced her to the supportive wife at public events while she outmaneuvered him behind the scenes. That same night, Marcus called with an update. The board just voted, he said. Brandon's been removed as CEO. They're bringing in an interim leader while they figure out next steps. I let the words settle. Not out of shock, I'd expected this, but because something deeper shifted inside me. It wasn't just about Brandon anymore. It was about the name, the Bennett name. The one my father had hoarded like a crown. The one he thought belonged only to heirs who mimicked him. The one Brandon carried like a birthright, and I carried like a burden. Now, I carried it like a key. There's more, Marcus continued. Some board members are quietly suggesting a merger. With your foundation, it may be the only way to salvage their reputation. I almost laughed. Bennett Strategies, begging for salvation from the same woman they called just a housewife, from the son they dismissed at every turn. Not interested, I said. That's what I thought, Marcus replied. After we hung up, I sat on my back porch and looked out at the bay. The tide was rising slowly, glittering under the porch light. The air smelled like pine and salt. My phone buzzed. A message from Brandon. They're destroying everything Dad built. Please, Nate, help me fix this. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to evolve. I hit send. Then I got back to work. 1 year later, I stood on a platform overlooking the Pacific, wind slicing across the deck, cameras flashing, scientists cheering. Behind me, a sleek humming machine began gliding into the ocean, our first large-scale, algae-based ocean cleaner. I'd imagined this moment since grad school. Back then, It was just an idea in a thesis no one wanted to fund. Now, it was a reality powered by my mother's foresight and my refusal to let her vision get buried. I cleared my throat, stepped to the mic, and looked out at a crowd of reporters, researchers, and investors. Today isn't just about the launch of a new technology, I began. It's about rewriting the rules. We've seen what happens when companies chase quarterly profits and ignore the planet. We've lived that story. Now it's time for a new one. They applauded, cameras clicked, and just beyond the railing, the sea shimmered, not in chaos, but in possibility. Near the back of the crowd, I spotted Brandon. He wasn't in a tailored suit this time. He looked smaller, not physically, just less polished, more human. Our eyes met. He didn't look away. After the event, he approached, hands in his jacket pockets, voice low. "Nice speech," he said. "Mum would have been proud." I searched his face. No sarcasm, no bitterness, just honesty. "How are you?" I asked. He gave a weak shrug. "Still adjusting. Not being Brandon Bennett, CEO anymore, is weird. Maybe not entirely a bad thing," I offered. We walked along the pier for a while in silence. A group of kids nearby were taking a tour of the cleanup facility, pointing at the launch barge with wide eyes. "I've been volunteering," Brandon said suddenly, "at a marine education centre, teaching kids about conservation." That stopped me in my tracks. "Seriously?" "Yeah," he said. "It's kind of grounding, watching them get it, seeing their excitement. It's not the same as being in a boardroom, but maybe that's the point." He wasn't lying. I could hear it in his voice, that rare tone of someone realizing they'd spent years chasing something that didn't matter. "Mum would have loved that," I said. "Yeah," he replied quietly. "She really would have." A few weeks later, Marcus showed up at my office with a sealed envelope. "This was scheduled for delivery on this date, 1 year after you opened your mother's original letter." I took it carefully, opened it slower than I meant to. Inside, a handwritten note. My mum's script, somehow even more confident now that I understood her fully. "My dearest Nathaniel, if you're reading this, then a year has passed since you stepped into what I left behind. I hope you've used it wisely, and from what I arranged to have monitored, I believe you have. But there's one last thing. Your brother, despite everything, is still your brother. He grew up in your father's world, and he paid for it in his own ways. If, in time, he shows real change, if he begins to understand what matters, then offer him this, a second chance." Attached was a trust agreement, a new fund, educational, focused on community-driven environmental learning, in Mum's handwriting on the title, the Brandon Bennett Coastal Awareness Initiative. I sat back in my chair, stunned. Even now, she was teaching me, not just how to lead, how to forgive. That evening, I invited Brandon over for dinner. We sat on my back deck, no boardroom table, no scripts. Just the ocean in the distance, a few beers, and two brothers who hadn't known how to talk to each other without a third-party mediator until now. I slid the envelope across the table. "She left it for you," I said, "but only if you earned it." He opened it, read it, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears in his eyes. "I don't know if I deserve this," he whispered. "That's not the question," I replied. "The question is, what will you do with it?" He nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. Maybe she knew I needed a purpose, not a title. Over the next few months, he threw himself into the new initiative like it was a company launch. But this time, it wasn't about branding or control. It was about showing kids how to test water salinity, teaching teens how algae breaks down microplastics, partnering with my team on curriculum design. We were working together. For real. No more shadows. No more pride games. On what would have been my mum's birthday, we hosted our first family event at her old garden. Brandon touched the same rose bush we'd both ignored for years. She used to talk about ecosystems, he said. Balance. I never listened. I smiled, brushing dirt from the roots. She never gave up on either of us. Later that night, I sat in my office reviewing research updates. On the wall were 2 photos, one of Mum teaching me about tidal ecosystems when I was a kid. And next to it, Brandon standing in front of a classroom, pointing to a map of coral reefs, grinning like a man who finally understood what it meant to build something real. Mum hadn't just built a legacy, she'd built possibility. And she trusted me, us, to carry it forward. My phone buzzed. A message from Brandon. The kids want to start a marine biology club. Want to help design it? I smiled. Texted back, count me in. Because the best kind of revenge isn't about destruction. It's about transformation. And that's exactly what we'd done, together. Story 2. When I finally closed on my dream home, I remember standing in the doorway, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and pride. After nearly a decade of non-stop grind back-to-back shifts, no vacations, ramen dinners, while classmates partied, I had done it. A 5-bedroom house in the quiet suburbs outside Portland, Oregon. Clean lines, big windows, a kitchen that practically begged for Sunday pancakes and late-night tea. I was 33, a trauma surgeon, single, tired, but finally on my feet. And then my family showed up. My mum barely stepped inside before deciding that my younger sister, Talia, should take the master bedroom. Just like that. It makes sense, she said, arms folded with that tone that suggested I should have already agreed. You're always working anyway, Ava. You won't be here much. Let her have the space she needs it for her business. Talia, 26, smiled like she'd won a prize. The lighting is perfect in there for my content, she said, gesturing with freshly manicured nails. And the acoustics are amazing for voiceovers. It's literally a dream for my YouTube setup. Right, her business. Another new venture in a long list of artistic experiments. Over the years, she'd burned through makeup school, candle making, 3 Etsy shops, and a 2-month fitness coaching stint that ended the moment she realized you had to, actually coach. But she always had our parents' support. Meanwhile, I was the one with calloused hands and silent achievements. Growing up, I wore her old shoes and watched her get new ones. When she dropped out of community college to explore her creativity, my parents used what was left of my education fund to help her set up a studio. I didn't argue. I never did. Until now. This is my house, I said calmly but clearly. I paid for it. Every cent. Don't be so territorial, Ava, Mum replied, waving me off like I was throwing a tantrum. This is a family home. No, it wasn't. But I didn't fight. Not yet. Because I had prepared for this. Months earlier, my friend and real estate lawyer, Samira, had warned me, your sister's going to try to take over, right? Get a contract in place. Something enforceable. At first, I resisted. I wanted to believe they wouldn't cross that line, but I knew better. So I drew one anyway. I drafted a property agreement, quietly, thoroughly, ironclad. It stated that any adult residing in the home for more than 30 days had to sign a lease and contribute financially. Any business use needed written consent, no exceptions. They didn't know that though. Not yet. So when my mum decided I should live in the finished basement because it had a separate entrance and I wouldn't be disturbed coming home late, I just smiled. Sure, I said. That's decided. 3 weeks in, it felt like Talia had moved in and started filming the real influencers of the Pacific Northwest. Boxes labelled Talia Ray Beauty spilled out into the hallway. The living room was now a camera haven, complete with light rings, fabric backdrops, and a LED sign with her brand name. The master bedroom had been redecorated entirely wallpaper, vanity lights, more serums than Sephora, and our parents, they acted like this was normal. "Your sister just needs support," Dad said while flipping through the newspaper in the sunroom I had designed for my morning coffee. "She's at a turning point in her career." "She's always at a turning point," I muttered. That Friday, I came home after a 14-hour surgery to find 25 strangers scattered across my house. A live streaming event, apparently. Talia in full glam, drinking Chardonnay under the chandelier I had installed, waving at a phone mounted on a tripod. "Oh, you're back," she chirped. "Say hi to the squad." I didn't. I just walked past the kitchen table, now covered in wine bottles and vegan hors d'oeuvre I didn't buy, and headed to my office. But not before I checked my credit card app. She had charged nearly $700 to my account. Event services, apparently. And that was it. I texted Samira, "It's time." She replied instantly, "Already on it." The following Tuesday, I called a family meeting. They assumed I was offering them dinner. Instead, Samira showed up in a slate grey blazer and heels sharp enough to draw blood. She dropped a stack of documents on the coffee table and introduced herself with cool professionalism. "I'm here as Ava's legal counsel. We'll be reviewing the residential agreement and financial expectations tied to this property." My mum looked confused. Dad frowned. "Talia?" she scoffed. "Is this a joke? You're acting like we're strangers renting an Airbnb." "No," I said. "I'm acting like the homeowner," Samira explained. Anyone staying over 30 days needed to sign a lease. Rent prices were non-negotiable. Talia's business use? That needed written permission. And if anyone refused to comply, they had 30 days to vacate. Talia's face turned red. "You're seriously evicting your own family?" she hissed. I looked at her, calm, tired, but not angry, not evicting, enforcing the rules. "You've been using my home like a studio, my credit like a business account, and me like a doormat. I'm done." Dad jumped in. "You're overreacting. You have money. Why are you being so cruel?" That word sat with me. Cruel. I'd worn shoes too small so Talia could have new ones. Given up my education so she could have a chance. Paid for dinners, holidays, emergencies because they assumed I'd always be the one to carry the weight. And now I was cruel. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I handed them the documents and said, "You have 30 days. After that, I file for legal removal." They tried everything: guilt, rage, bargaining. Talia even offered to pay me in exposure, whatever that meant. But I didn't budge. They called me heartless. I called a locksmith. By week 2 of the eviction notice, the mood in the house had turned sour. Talia stopped pretending to be sweet. Her usual sugary tone was replaced with slammed doors and passive-aggressive vlogging. I caught her once recording a tearful monologue in the kitchen, something about being betrayed by her own blood. She saw me, paused for dramatic effect, then turned the camera off. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Mum was worse. She kept making these pointed comments over breakfast like, "Some people forget who changed their diapers," or, "If I had known gratitude had an expiration date, I'd have written the due date in your baby book." I didn't take the bait. I'd spent years trying to win their approval. But once you taste the peace that comes with saying no, you stop caring about applause from the wrong audience. Dad tried playing peacemaker, asking me to compromise. Said Talia was just going through a phase, but at 26, Talia had phased through more careers than I had favourite mugs. They weren't getting it. So I moved forward. The next morning, a formal lease agreement showed up in each of their rooms, along with a breakdown of utilities and a payment schedule. The rent was fair below market, honestly, but symbolic. This wasn't about money. It was about responsibility. Mum crumpled hers and tossed it at my feet. "You're choosing contracts over family?" "No," I said. "I'm choosing boundaries. You're choosing not to respect them." That night, I changed the Wi-Fi password. The next day, I revoked access to the smart thermostat and switched the fingerprint locks on the garage door. If they weren't willing to live here respectfully, then they couldn't live here, period. Talia threw a fit when her ring lights cut off mid-live stream, screamed at me in the hallway that I was ruining her brand and killing her momentum. "The only thing I'm killing," I told her, "is your sense of entitlement." She didn't respond, just stormed off, leaving a trail of glitter and fake lashes behind her like breadcrumbs to nowhere. Week 3 was quiet. Too quiet. No more strangers in my living room. No more studio lights blinding me in the middle of the night. Talia stopped inviting her brand team over, which was just a bunch of people who liked free wine and had a lot of followers but zero jobs. She still hadn't signed the lease. None of them had. Samira said to hold firm. "Give them the full 30 days. If they're still here after that, we start the legal process. But my guess? They'll leave before then. People like that don't stay where they aren't catered to." And she was right. 2 days before the deadline, I came home from work and saw suitcases lined up in the hallway. My mum was packing the last of the dishes into a box, clinking them louder than necessary, like the noise itself was punishment. Talia had her phone in hand, but for once it wasn't recording. Her face was pale, no foundation, no filters. Dad looked at me and said nothing. They left that evening, no tears, no hugs, not even a thank you. But I didn't need one. I stood in the doorway long after their car pulled away. The silence in the house didn't feel cold. It felt earned. 3 weeks passed. I had the locks changed again just in case. Cleaned every room top to bottom, took down the ridiculous silver wallpaper in the master, and finally moved my books into the study. It felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself, not just space. I still got texts, guilt trips, Bible verses, vague quotes posted on Facebook. My mum tagged me in one that said, "Honour thy parents, even when you think you know better." I blocked her. Not forever. Just long enough to breathe without their expectations pressing against my lungs. One night, around 2 a.m, I got a voicemail from Talia. She didn't cry, but her voice cracked just enough. "I didn't realise how much I leaned on you until you stopped letting me. I get why you did it. I wish I had seen it sooner." I didn't call her back, but I saved the message. It was the first time in years she didn't ask for anything. 6 weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. Inside was a handwritten note from Talia, short, honest. "You were the first person to ever call me out, and the only one who didn't clean up my mess. I hated you for it. Then I needed you for it. Now I respect you for it." Attached was a photo. She'd gotten a job at a local fitness studio as a receptionist. Said she was figuring it out. No glam, no filters. Just a tired girl in a t-shirt and ponytail, smiling like she meant it. I stared at that photo for a long time. That night, I texted her, "Let's grab coffee sometime. No cameras. Just us." She replied within a minute, "I'd like that. It's funny. People think drawing a line means cutting someone out, but sometimes drawing a line is the only way someone learns where they end and you begin." My house was quiet again. My schedule was still hectic, but but the space felt like mine, like it had always meant to be. The basement, empty. The master bedroom, finally mine. No studio lights, no lavender walls. Just sunlight in the mornings and the quiet hum of peace. There was no dramatic ending, no courtroom drama. Just a series of choices, paperwork, locks, silence. And in that silence, something grew. Not revenge, not resentment, clarity. I wasn't cruel, I was finally kind to myself. It was raining the morning we met for coffee. Not the wild, sideways kind of rain, just a steady, soft drizzle that smelled like wet pavement and pine. I pulled into the little corner cafe near downtown and spotted Talia sitting by the window. No ring light, no selfie stick, just a cup in her hand and a nervous smile on her face. I stood there a second before going in, not because I was unsure, but because for the first time in a long while, I saw her not the curated version she performed online, but my sister, quiet, still, present. I walked in, and she stood up halfway before awkwardly settling back down. "You still drink black coffee, no sugar?" she asked, pushing a cup across the table. I nodded. "You remembered," she smiled. "I remember more than you think." We sat for a moment, both of us watching the rain instead of jumping straight into whatever this was. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower, like she didn't want to break the peace around us. "I got a second job," she said. "Still at the studio during the day, but I'm hosting at a restaurant in the evenings. It's humbling." I nodded, sipping my coffee. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I thought I hated you, you know. When you made us leave, I thought you were cold, ungrateful." I looked at her. "And now?" she sighed. "Now I think maybe you were the only one who ever told me the truth." It was quiet after that. Not awkward, just full. I let her speak without interruption. She told me about late-night bus rides, how she cried after her first shift cleaning bathrooms, how she started budgeting, how she applied for real jobs instead of just writing CEO in her Instagram bio. I listened, not as a doctor, not as the older sister who always cleaned up after her, but as someone who had finally stopped giving more than she received. "I used to think love meant never saying no to people you care about," she said, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "But now I think maybe real love means knowing when to step back so they can stand on their own." I nodded. "Sometimes love looks like a locked door." She chuckled, wiping a tear that had slipped out. "Yeah. And a lease agreement taped to the fridge." We laughed then. For the first time in years, it didn't feel forced. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee more often. Sometimes she talked, sometimes I did. Sometimes we sat in silence, just watching the city move around us. She wasn't living some magical redemption arc. She was just showing up. Every day. Small, steady steps. Our parents weren't happy. They thought I'd broken the family. Mum sent me a long email, half guilt trip, half lecture, asking when I'd come to my senses. I never replied. Dad texted once, said he missed Sunday dinners. I told him he was welcome to visit if he called ahead, respected the rules, and brought his own wine. He didn't respond, and that was fine. I'd learned something important. Family without respect is just obligation wrapped in guilt. I wasn't carrying that anymore. The house felt different now. Not just quieter, cleaner, lighter, mine. The living room, once cluttered with Talia's lights and products, now held a modest bookcase and a single plant I remembered to water. The basement was empty, save for a folded treadmill and a spare bed in case someone needed a place to crash with permission. The master bedroom. finally had my things in it. My grandmother's quilt, a real desk, a framed photo of me and Talia from when we were kids laughing at a birthday party, frosting on our cheeks. I didn't hang it out of nostalgia. I hung it to remember where we started. And how far we'd both come. One Sunday morning, she texted me, made it to 90 days at both jobs. First time I haven't quit something in months. Want to celebrate. My treat. I stared at the screen for a second, then smiled. Only if it's not an MLM event in disguise. She sent back a crying laugh emoji. No glitter, no pitches, just real food. We met at a little diner. She ordered pancakes. I got eggs. No cameras, no hashtags. Just two sisters sharing space, finally as equals. Toward the end of the meal, she looked up and said, "I don't want to move back in." "Not even if you asked." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a weird flex." She smiled. "I just want you to know I'm not here because I need you. I'm here because I want to be." And that was everything. 6 months later, I stood in front of the same house I bought with my own hands, in scrubs, holding takeout, and a key that only fit my lock. No noise inside, no mess, no tension clawing at my throat, just peace. The kind you build, the kind you defend. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was the slow, hard-earned return of myself to myself. And that's the kind of victory no one claps for. But it's the kind that lasts. Story 3. I never imagined I'd be standing in that room, staring down a woman who once pretended to be my mentor. But here I was, watching her pass my life's work off to her daughter, like it was some gift bag at a corporate gala. Let me back up. My name is Jordan Ray, 32, and for the last 4 years, I'd been the senior systems architect at a cutting-edge tech company called Core Vision Labs. Think AI, quantum learning, next-gen simulations. And the project that got me here? Something I called Project Lucent, an artificial intelligence engine capable of predictive pattern recognition far beyond anything else in the market. It was my baby. 3 years of work, thousands of hours. I coded it, debugged it, nurtured it like a living thing. And now it was finally ready for the pitch. A presentation in front of high-tier investors that could either rocket Core Vision into the future or leave us in the dust. No pressure, right? But as I stood in that sleek, glass-walled boardroom, something felt off, a weird, static tension. And then came the curveball. "Jordan," said Miranda Vale, the company's CEO, with a professional smile so thin it could slice titanium. "We've made a slight change for the investor pitch." I blinked. A change? Everyone else, CTO, CFO, directors, suddenly found their notepads and phones very interesting. "Lucent will still be the core of the presentation," she said, waving a hand like I was being silly. "But we've decided Kira will be the one to deliver it." Kira Vale, her 26-year-old daughter, fresh from some high-gloss MBA program, 6 months in the company, no engineering background. And the only thing she contributed to Project Lucent was once asking me if it could be made more social media friendly. I felt my stomach drop. "She's presenting my work? You'll support from the tech side," Miranda added. "Behind the scenes." My voice was quiet. "That's not how this works, you know that." She leaned in like she was offering me a compliment. "You're brilliant, Jordan, but we need someone with a more polished image for this audience." The rage I felt was sharp, cold, and quiet. I glanced across the table, looking for anyone to object. Alan, our CTO, looked confused, like this was news to him too. But no one else said a word, not a peep. That was the moment I knew. They'd planned this behind closed doors. My gut had whispered it to me for months, and now it screamed. But here's the thing. They thought I was just another engineer. Quiet, smart, disposable. What they didn't know, I'd been preparing for this day longer than they'd been scheming. About 6 months prior, I'd started noticing irregularities, tiny things. Access logs showing unauthorized views on Lucent's codebase, legal language shifting in internal memos, Kira's name mentioned in early drafts of press kits as if she had been part of Lucent's creation all along. So I did what any tech-savvy person in a company full of snakes would do. I kept records. Every shady meeting, every version, control, timestamp, every email hinting at their intentions. I built a digital vault, encrypted and timestamped. If they wanted war, I'd make sure it was on my terms. And right now, it was time. I opened my laptop in that glossy conference room and calmly sent an email I had written weeks ago, a very detailed one. It went to the full board of directors, senior stakeholders, and the company's legal team. Not just a complaint. No, this was a data-rich expose. It contained evidence of internal manipulation, fraudulent licensing discussions, and worst of all, confidential Lucent specs sent to competitors. The sound of chimes and phone vibrations started within seconds. Miranda stopped mid-sentence, her phone lighting up. Her eyes scanned the message, then widened, then turned into full-blown panic. "What is this?" she demanded. I didn't flinch. Proof. Alan looked between us. "Miranda, is this real?" Miranda looked like she wanted to melt into her leather chair. "This is absurd. Fabricated." Completely. The conference room doors opened, and in walked Elijah Tran, chairman of the board, flanked by 2 corporate attorneys. "Miranda," he said in that calm but deadly voice, only board chairs and mob bosses seem to master, "we need to have a conversation. Privately." She stood, trembling but defiant. "This is a smear campaign." "She's lying." I stayed seated. "You can check the internal server logs. You'll see the file access histories, the timestamps, the flagged data leaks." Elijah turned to the lawyers. "Start with that." She glared at me. "You're just an engineer." I smiled. "That's what you thought." I stood and walked to the head of the table, pulled a folder from my bag and placed it down. In case anyone's wondering, I own 42% of Core Vision's shares. Silence. Utter silence. Lucas Ward, the company founder, sold them to me before he retired. He trusted me to keep the company from exactly this kind of exploitation. "You're bluffing," Kira said, arms folded, mask of confidence starting to slip. Alan looked through the folder, then at me. "This checks out, which means," I said, turning to Miranda, "you're officially outvoted. Effective immediately." The look on her face? Shock. Disbelief. The kind people get when they realize the safety net they thought was there never existed. Elijah gave a polite nod. "Miranda Vale, you're suspended from all duties pending further investigation." Security entered the room seconds later. She stood slowly, burning with rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I shrugged. "Maybe, but you'll remember it." Kira opened her mouth to speak, but for once, thought better of it. Later that day, in the same conference room, Elijah asked me one simple question. "What do you want to do next?" I took a breath. The kind you take when your whole life has just split open and realigned. I want to lead, not as the engineer people ignore, as the executive this company deserves. "Then it's yours," he said. I nodded. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. It didn't hit me right away. After Miranda was escorted out of the building, still shouting about conspiracies and legal threats, I just stood there. Hands steady. Heart weirdly calm. I thought I'd feel triumphant. Maybe even smug. Instead, I felt relief, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after 3 years underwater. Lucent was safe. My team was safe. And I wasn't going to be sidelined anymore. But there were still loose ends, and one of them was sitting silently across from me. Kira. She hadn't moved since Miranda was removed. Her whole confident business prodigy act had cracked somewhere between the bored's silence and the security guards arriving. Now, she just looked lost. "Kira," I said, my voice steady. She glanced up, wide-eyed, pale, like she wanted to disappear into the leather chair. "Do you have anything to say?" She swallowed hard. "My mum told me to do it." I didn't think it'd go this far. I studied her. It's funny she'd walked in 6 months ago acting like the future CEO, all flash and fake smiles. And now? She looked like a kid who finally realised the world doesn't run on parental guarantees. "You knew what you were doing," I said. Not harsh, just honest. "You let everyone think you built something you didn't even understand." She didn't deny it. "I was trying to make her proud," she mumbled. "She said if I pulled it off, I'd be ready for the real world." I leaned back in my chair. The real world doesn't run on smoke and mirrors, Kira. It runs on work. On showing up, even when no one's looking. You skipped all of that and expected applause. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Good, because I wasn't here to play therapist. Elijah stepped back in, holding a file. "We're moving forward with full legal review. The board will vote on permanent leadership next week, but between Miranda's suspension and Jordan's share control, the writing's on the wall." Kira sat straighter. "What's going to happen to me?" Elijah gave her a long look. "That depends on whether you're ready to tell the truth." Silence. Then she nodded. "I'll cooperate." 3 days later, I sat in my office, my new office. Same skyline view, but a whole different weight on my shoulders now. We launched the internal audit. Emails, logs, vendor payments, licensing deals. Everything Miranda touched in the last 2 years was under scrutiny. She wasn't just pushing me out, she'd been carving out pieces of core vision and sliding them to friends, partners, competitors, all while playing the visionary CEO. It was wild how deep it went. Meanwhile, Kira followed through. Her testimony backed up everything, gave names, timelines, even screenshots. I couldn't tell if it was guilt, fear, or just survival instinct, but she didn't hold back. And for once, I respected that. She showed up to my office one afternoon, no makeup, no designer heels, just jeans, a turtleneck and a folder. "I want to apply for a position," she said. I blinked. "You're serious?" "I want to earn it this time," she said. No shortcuts. No help from her. Just me. I opened the folder. Entry-level marketing. She wasn't asking to lead anything. Just wanted a start. After a pause, I slid it back across the desk. "Fine. You start in digital content. Bottom rung. No perks, no favours. You show up or you don't show at all." She nodded. "Deal." And weirdly enough, I believed her. 3 months passed. Lucent's official launch looked like something out of a sci-fi film. Full auditorium, massive LED screen, global live stream, and me standing front and centre. "This isn't just another software release," I told the room. "This is a promise that innovation and integrity can and must go hand in hand." The applause was loud, but what mattered more? The nods from my team, the engineers, the testers, the analysts, the ones who stayed late and debugged code at 3 a.m. They were finally seen. And yeah, Ryan the CTO gave me the proudest look I'd ever seen from him. "We did it," he said after the event. I smiled. We finally did. A few days later, Elijah pulled me aside. Miranda's legal hearing wrapped, he said. She's under house arrest. 5 years. Financial restitution to Core Vision. Her reputation's gone. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about watching someone lose everything, even if they deserved it. Still, I wasn't going to pretend she didn't bring it on herself. And Kira? She stuck to her word. Showed up early. Stayed late. No attitude. No name dropping. Just quiet work. One evening, she stopped by my office again. No one's answering my mum's calls anymore, she said quietly. Investors, friends, even family. They all backed away. That's what happens when you build an empire on borrowed credit, I replied. She looked down. Do you think people can change? I shrugged. Some can, but change doesn't come from punishment. It comes from doing better when no one's watching. She nodded and left. And for once, I didn't feel like she was playing a part. That weekend, I stayed late to catch up on work. Around 9 p.m, I looked out over the city from the glass wall of my office. The skyline glowed, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I felt still, peaceful. But I wasn't done, because the real legacy, it wasn't Lucent, it was the culture we were building. One where engineers weren't just ghosts in the machine, where your work couldn't be stolen because someone's daughter had shinier teeth, and maybe other places would follow our lead. A year passed. That's how fast time moves when the world stops spinning against you. Core Vision wasn't just alive, it was thriving. Lucent got picked up by health systems, urban planners, disaster response teams. The kind of impact I used to daydream about when I was running on gas station coffee and debugging code under flickering office lights. And now? Now I sat in the corner office, not because someone handed it to me, but because I earned it with every late night, every ignored meeting, every time they talked over me and I kept talking anyway. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding, not just the company, but what it stood for. People think power looks like raised voices and slammed doors. But real power? It's quiet. It's walking into a meeting room full of people who used to underestimate you and knowing they don't anymore. That's what this year taught me. One Monday, Ryan knocked on my door with that look he gets when something interesting crosses his desk. There's someone who wants to meet with you, he said. I think you'll want to hear his story. I raised an eyebrow. That right? He stepped aside. And in came a young guy, maybe 24, 25, wearing an old hoodie and jeans that had definitely seen a few coding marathons. Hi, he said, nervous but steady. I'm Elias Trent, software engineer. I shook his hand and motioned for him to sit. Ryan left us, and I scanned the resume Elias handed over. Solid experience. Nothing flashy, no Ivy League stamp, just grit and consistency. I could smell the long nights in every line of that CV. So, Elias, I said, leaning back, why Core Vision? He paused. Looked me right in the eye. Because I heard this is the kind of place where your work actually matters. I didn't respond right away, just watched him for a second. Where were you before? I asked. A startup, he said. I built a scheduling AI. The guy who ran it told investors he did the work. Used my demo to raise capital. I got pushed out before we launched. Let me guess, I said. They told you to be a team player. His smile was sad. Said I didn't have the vision. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, I've heard that before. He looked down, fiddled with a pen on the desk. I almost quit tech. Then someone sent me your Lucent keynote. I figured maybe it's not all like that. That moment stayed with me. Because I remembered being him, not that long ago. I remembered what it felt like to wonder if maybe you just weren't meant for the game, because the rules seemed rigged from the start. I looked him straight in the eye. You'll never be overlooked here for not playing politics. Do the work. Do it right. That's all we ask. He nodded, eyes steady. That's all I want. He got the job. Not because of a referral. Not because of a last name, but because talent deserved a home. A few weeks later, I was walking through the open workspace teams, clustered around whiteboards, some lounging on beanbags, others deep in code. The energy was different, lighter, more grounded. Kira walked by, clipboard in hand. She didn't notice me at first, just focused on coordinating a marketing rollout. I let her pass without saying anything. She didn't need applause. She needed space to earn her own, and she was. Every time someone came up to me saying she's really finding her rhythm, I just nodded. People change when you stop giving them shortcuts. Even she understood that now. News eventually spread about Miranda, disgraced, disconnected. No board wanted her name anywhere near their assets. She was under house arrest, still writing emails to old allies who never responded. I got a message from someone who used to work under her. All it said was, she thought she couldn't be replaced. Turns out, everyone is eventually. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the only response worth giving. On my 1-year mark as CEO, we held a small dinner at headquarters. Not the media circus kind. Just the core team, the real ones. The folks who stayed when it was hard, and the ones who came after, looking for something better. We laughed, shared stories, remembered what it felt like to be treated like background noise in our own profession. After the cake and speeches, Ryan raised a glass. To Jordan, he said, voice strong. You didn't just save this company. You taught us what it means to lead without fear, without ego, just honesty and grit. Everyone clapped. I gave a short nod, thanks. But I didn't do it alone. I meant it. Because leadership, real leadership, isn't standing on a stage and soaking in the spotlight. It's making sure everyone around you shines too. The night ended quietly. I stayed behind a little longer, walking the halls, remembering the version of me who used to sneak extra hours just to get noticed, who used to wonder if working hard would ever be enough. I stopped by Lucent's original dev room. Same scratched desk, same coffee stains. But now, a plaque on the wall, built by those who refuse to be ignored. I smiled. Legacy isn't something you inherit. It's something you build, line by line, moment by moment, until the people who tried to erase you are just a footnote in your story. I didn't burn their bridges. I built a whole damn highway. And this time, I brought everyone with me.